Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet. I'm in New South Wales, burrowing in New South Wales in Australia. It is Wednesday afternoon, and it is my pleasure to be talking to Dr. Jeffrey Buske, who is in, Jeffrey, you are in
Granbury,
yes, which is 40 minutes southwest of Fort Worth in Texas, and it's Tuesday night there and getting towards Jeff's bedtime. But Jeff, thanks very much for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Looking forward to a great conversation. Hopefully we can give listeners some new insights and possibly maybe some new tools and create a great opportunity. That's what we want to do.
That'd be great. Now, Jeff, you and I have been known to each other and corresponding in the written word on LinkedIn primarily for the last couple of years. And I've said it to myself and I've said it to you that when you comment on my blog posts and then we start exchanging conversation, it's like I'm talking to myself. We're definitely much on the same wavelength. And that is that we talk in terms of business success is about systems, processes, and looking after your customers. And it's great to know that there are other people who are switched on, are drinking out of that customer service. Once you've been in touch with that customer service wand, it's very hard to forget that. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation because your story, a little bit different to mine, but similar in a lot of ways. But I think if they were making a movie, yours would be the more dramatic plot for sure, your history. So Jeff, tell us about your practice. Tell us about your journey from dental school to where you are now. And now that you're a 3-day-a-week dentist with a successful practice, but also a successful coaching business. So Jeff, tell us that story.
Yeah, and interrupt anywhere along the way too, David. Just as we go through, it's interesting. Gosh, I knew and I figured out that I wanted to be a dentist when I was 17. I grew up in Minnesota, which was very, very cold compared to Texas, and so grew up playing a lot of winter sports, and I loved hockey. And I remember it was an afternoon hockey game, and I was skating up the ice with the puck. And the first guy I got around, the second guy I got around, the third guy I didn't get around, and his elbow connected with my face. And I had a helmet on and a mouth guard and everything, but I got hit so hard that I remember looking up at the ceiling of the ice rink and thinking, oh my gosh, for a second, like, where am I? And nowadays, I'm sure I had a concussion when I look back at it. But I remember getting to the bench and I could taste the blood on my lip, and I went to my teammate and I said, how bad is my lip? And, I took my mouth guard out and he goes, forget your lip. Like, where's your tooth? And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt up there with my tongue. My front tooth was broken in half. And I thought, oh my gosh. My first thought was my parents are going to kill me. My mom actually worked for a dentist. She was a dental assistant for 23 years. And So not only was it that was happening, but this was an afternoon hockey game. And I remember I had a date that night. It was a first date with a girl from a different school. And I was like, okay, I'm a 17-year-old self-conscious kid. Do I go on this date or not? And so I said, I might not ever get another opportunity. I'm going. And so, opened the door and she was like, oh my gosh, what happened? I was like, hockey. And she's like, do you still want to go? I was like, of course. So I thought, that's a pretty good girl to go out with you when your face is a mess and you look like a wreck. But what was great about it was it gave me a little bit of empathy for what a lot of our patients feel. Like my hope was like, I hope the dentist can repair my smile. I hope my parents can afford it. And how long is this going to take? And is it going to hurt? I mean, I have the same concerns that all of our patients have, right? And when I got to see the artistry that went into that, I was like, man, this is so cool. And that's what got me interested in dentistry. So at that time, that's when I knew that's what I wanted to do. And, went through dental school in Texas here at Baylor. And then I got out and I spent a long time doing a lot of continuing education, like just pouring into continuing education all over. Went through Dawson and to learn different things with occlusion. Went learn from Morley, Mopper, Eubanks, all these things in LSU Continuum for aesthetics. And then I did endo with Buchanan. And then I started my implant preceptorship in San Antonio, and then did a ton of implant stuff all the way with Carl Misch when he was still alive, with working with Hilt Tatum, and that's where my interest really started to take off in dental implants. But it was interesting, David, because at first I was in a practice that it was a really nice practice, but it wasn't one where we did a lot of marketing. It was kind of a slower paced practice. And I had this illusion that if I had all these skill sets developed, that people would just magically come in, right? That I would be like hanging up the shingle, like they should just come because they should know how amazing my skill set is. And that's only part of the equation, just as you know. I mean, you've got to be able to get people in, and then you've got to be able to treat them amazingly well. You have to create a culture that works, and you have to have an amazing experience for your patients. I felt like the guy who was all dressed up for prom, but no date. Like I had all these skill sets to use, but I didn't have the patience to use them on. And I found myself like starving and like wondering, can I make my car payment? Can I make where I was living? Can I make my rent? And all those things. I thought, man, I went to dental school for this. And I was very disheartened. I was very close to actually leaving dentistry. And I remember being on Dental Town. I remember Bruce Baird was typing something on there about productivity. And I thought, this is interesting. I didn't know Bruce from anybody. But what he was saying on there, I was like, whoa, that was so far out from what I was thinking. So I private messaged him, and he's got a funny story about what I said. And if you don't mind, I'll tell you, but you might have to beep it out. But I private messaged him, and I said, there's no fucking way you're doing what you're doing. It can be legal. And he didn't know me from anybody. He was very kind, and he wrote me back, and he said, no, he said, we have systems and processes and people. Those are three very important things to having a successful practice, as you know. And he said, by the way, where do you practice? I told him. He's like, I'm going to be up there next weekend for a sleep meeting. And I was like, he goes, do you want to get together and have a drink? I said, sure. And mind you, David, at this time, I was close to like leaving dentistry. So we talked, and he said, do you really want to leave dentistry? I said, well, the way I'm practicing now, yes. And he said, well, it'd be kind of a shame. Maybe if you had the right environment and a number of good new patients. Long story short, we were going to look at doing a practice together, but then that got sold. And then he had an opportunity. Now, this was interesting. He had an opportunity to come in his practice. He said, I don't know if you'd like to do this, but he goes, I've got an opening in my practice. This was after a couple of months. And I said, sure. Now, this practice where I live now with Granbury, Texas, that was 72 miles away from where I was living. So for almost a year, I drove back and forth 4 days a week. And my friends would be like, golly, I can't believe you're driving that, in the morning and at night. I said, you know what? I'm practicing the way that I was designed and built to practice. I love it. I love it. And that was a big, big part. And then he and I practiced together for 17 years. It was great, great partnership. Learned a lot. But along the way, I started to think, you know what? I want to also do a second practice. And I got this amazing idea to do a second practice. And so open scratch practice. It was 52 miles away. And I started that. And that's when I started to see, oh my gosh, I just gave myself a second job.
Yeah.
And I started to realize that, oh man, and I didn't necessarily have the tools to manage any of the type of stress. Like, let's face it, when you get out of dental school, you have barely any tools to do any type of business anyway. You have no business acumen, no business experience, no management, no leadership training, nothing. Now, you couple that with then I'm building a scratch practice 52 miles away. I'm working in my main practice 4 days a week, working in my scratch practice 1 day a week, trying to build a culture and a great system with new processes over there. And sometimes it felt like you're playing Dr. Daycare and everything else. And I was still pulling it off and building it, but I just did not have a great understanding. Nobody had ever shown me or taught me, or I just didn't know how to truly manage all the stress that was with it. And so what I would do was then I would just take and I would drink every day. And it was it was my way of trying to numb out and numb away some of the that stress and overwhelming feeling. And it would work for a little bit, but in the morning then I felt like crap. I didn't feel like working out. It certainly didn't help anything inside of my marriage or my relationship with my kids. I was disconnected with God. I mean, just the whole onslaught of things just kept getting, as you can imagine, worse and worse and worse. And it wasn't until one Friday night when my wife and I finally had enough wine to drink and we were having a true deep conversation or argument, you might say. And she looked at me and she said, Jeff, I didn't sign up for this shit. And the kids and I walk around here every day on eggshells. And all we want to do is love you, and you come home and blow up on us. And I remember sitting there and it was like I got punched right in the gut. And it was a good gut punch because I needed it. But I didn't even have a response because that was the truth. And I remember laying there in bed that night and I remember thinking, you know what, God, I created this, but just show me a way or show me a path out. And lo and behold, I had a mentor that is still a mentor of mine. Something came across my feed that next week. I think that's fate and or faith or whatever you may call it, but it showed up and I hired that mentor. I started to implement. I hired some other coaches. And what I started to do was just put things into play right away. I didn't question it. They were standing in a place where I knew that I desired to be. So I took what they recommended and I put it into play immediately. And I started to see things begin to dramatically shift inside of my world because I was leading myself very differently. And when you can step in and lead yourself very differently, now you can start to lead your family differently. You can start to lead your teams differently. You can start to lead your patients or your customers differently. And when you do that, now you create an environment that becomes more of an invitation and starts to allow you to have, at that time, then building a culture inside of my practice that became much more meaningful. And I was much happier, if that makes sense. That was a very long answer.
It's quite the journey, and you know, there's a lot of people out there who do get focused on the wrong thing in life, and then all of a sudden everything else in their life falls apart, and
Yeah.
then the rest of their life is then catching up for that and paying the price for that error. I won't call it a mistake, but it's an error of judgment,
Yes.
because and just as you were telling that story, it reminded me of something that I spotted. I was doing some cleaning out of some paper files, and I spotted a coach's report that I used to have to fax to a business coach that I had, and it was a wheel, and there was different spokes on the wheel, and you had to have balance so the wheel stayed round. Otherwise, if you said I've got 10 out of 10 for business, but 2 out of 10 for family, that wheel's not going to spin. It's not going to roll.
Right.
And
It's like
so
the spokes coming out of the wheel.
you've got to make sure that you've got that balance, and that it you're right. You do spend a lot of time at work, but you do spend a lot of time at home, and you can't ignore that. And it's important to be able to catch that up and
Yes.
repair it. And I'm glad you were able to do that. So you said you rediscovered your faith, you rediscovered your fitness, you
Yes.
rediscovered your family.
Yes.
That was great to be able to have that opportunity to put it all back together rather than have to start a new faith, start a new business.
Absolutely. It makes life so much easier. What I also realized is just the fact of, I just need to shift some of my priorities. That was a big part of it. And, you and I were talking a little bit and really taking a good hard look in the mirror and just, having the ability to admit, hey, look, I'm the one who's causing the issues. I'm the one that's causing the problems, and taking massive ownership of that. And when you can take massive ownership of that and tell yourself the truth and take accountability, now you might not like the place that you're sitting, but when you're honest with yourself, you can get yourself back into an integrity. And there's no better person on the planet to fix it than you, since you've created it. So that's the beauty. Once I started to own that, and I was like, okay, I might not like where I'm at, and I don't like where I'm at. And that makes it really easy when you don't like where you're at and you own it. And now you also are working with somebody who can help guide you in the right place. Now you can go further faster, a lot easier. You've got, say, a roadmap or an action plan or whatever it is. But now it becomes an opportunity to create transformation and not just change. I think change is kind of more external and it can sometimes go back, but transformation to me is like internal, and it's completely something else by the time you're done. Like when I look back now, the man that I was in 2016 is completely unrecognizable. I'd run circles around him now. And because it's also just a very different mindset. So in business and in life, I mean, to be successful, we've got to have great skill sets. But then the other half of the equation is we've got to have a great mindset in order to create those systems and create those processes and create that ability to have discipline and commitment, have the ability to look forward and and cast a vision as a leader. And when we can do that, then we've got to be able to enroll our team in that. We've got to be able to enroll our clients inside of that space. And that's what's part of all, then learning how to be a great communicator. And that's to me, it's such a fun part of what I get to do, whether I'm doing dentistry or whether I'm doing coaching. I think I'm just kind of a naturally curious person. So I love the opportunity to ask questions with my clients. And it's a fun way to be. It's a fun way to go through life.
You raise a couple of interesting points there, Jeff, in the fact that dental school only prepares you to have the skills to do certain dental procedures only,
Right.
and no business skills, no people skills, no HR skills, no marketing skills, no
No.
financial management skills, and you're thrown out with a certificate, and you've got to get a job and hope that the person who gives you the job is kind enough to then mentor you for free, so that and often in cases, dental students who become uh, associate dentists in a practice then leave and become the competitor of the person who then mentored them in business skills. That's kind of a sick model, that the mentor gets sold, or you must
Yeah.
help grow the profession. Now,
Yes.
really good point that you raised is that people come out with some really good clinical skills, and they think that they can just grow a practice by getting better at clinical skills. And
Right.
you and I both know that some of the really great clinicians that we saw in our dental schools with us had very
Struggle.
unsuccessful practices and struggled with growing a practice, running a
Yes.
profitable practice, and creating a lifestyle. You and I both know that when you master those business and customer service skills, that gives you the opportunity to create a better lifestyle for
Yes.
yourself, as long as you balance it, and then
Yes.
nurture that opportunity to then live where you want, send your children to school where you want, put away enough money to retire when you want, where you want to. And that's what I always come back to dentists with, is that part of your plan? There's no 40-year plan. They don't get a 40-year plan when they graduate. And
No.
so you were able to find that, and you mentioned the name Bruce Baird, and I've known known of Bruce for a long time, a really good operator. So for your opportunity to go and work with him and learn his systems, whether he taught them to you or not, you can learn them by osmosis.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I worked as an associate in a practice for 3 years before I bought my own, and it gave me a lot of business acumen. Gave me one principle, that you didn't need to live where your practice was, that you could actually live where you wanted your
Hmm.
children to go to school, but you could create a business that worked well, for you, that would
That's
allow you
beautiful.
that. And so
Is
that,
that we can, I was going to say that's the best part about it is that we buy into all these stories, right? Like if you want to know if you want to know how somebody's operating, is looking at what stories are they telling themselves or what beliefs do they have. So to your point, most people think I've got to live exactly right here if I'm going to build my practice here. That's just a story. The reality is you can design your life and your practice any way that you want. For me right now, working 3 days a week, I love to be able to be wrapped up and then to go pick up our youngest from school. He's 14 and it's just like, I love that opportunity to still be able to go do that. And that's important to me. So I love being able to start at 7 and then wrap up by the early afternoon and have an opportunity to go pick them up. And that's fantastic. But it's creating a life by design and not default. And there's a big difference to that. When you create a life by design, you're very intentional with what you're doing. And you're very intentional about your targets or your goals and the vision that you created, as I mentioned. And when you start to look at that in that manner, things then start to become more fulfilling, I think, in the way in which you operate, in the way in which you see the world, the way in which you have experiences, the way in which you create the adventures, not only for yourself, but for your family and your team members and everything. And then that's what allows us to really have the opportunity to create a life that's not only fulfilling, but that's also impactful because you're impacting others along the way.
what were those three things that Bruce said? He said systems,
People, processes, and systems.
people, processes, and systems. Yeah,
I think,
and you're
is
right.
that those are three things to make a successful practice. I totally agree with that. And when you say, well, what is success? And I think it's different for everybody because we all have different desires, and what you may find successful, I don't, or what I might, you're like, nah, that's not for me, whatever that is. And I like thinking about success as creating a life that you love to wake up to. That is very easy to define because it's different for every person. So, and look, we're all at different seasons. Some of the individuals listening on this, you might not be married, you might not have kids, you might be young inside of your journey here that you're starting on in your dental career. And then there's others that are going to be seasoned, a little more gray haired like me, that have been in the game for a little while. And so there's all places that we're at. We're all at different seasons. You just got to figure out like what's right for you. And I think this is funny because you and I talk to enough dentists, David, and I'm curious about this, is that I ask one very simple question, and it's funny how it's very difficult to get a really great accurate response. And the simple question is, what do you want? Like, what do you want? And it's a very simple question, right? We should be able to answer that very easily. And what I get from a lot of dentists is I hear everything that they don't want first, and it's very easy to define that. But then you say, that's great, but what do you want? And I think as human beings, sometimes it's hard sometimes for us to express this, hey, this is what I want, or this is what I desire. And because we're so used to not necessarily putting that out there into the world. Does that make
Jeff,
sense?
it does make a lot of sense. We spoke earlier that there are a large proportion of the dental profession unhappy with their career in dentistry. You know, they've got big student debts; they get bigger every year. Um,
Yes.
Practice debts in buying a practice or setting up a scratch practice. You know, they can be $1.5, $2 million just to get to there, and no customers or
Right.
risk involved. And then you've got marriage, children on top of that.
Yeah.
Again, who's selling this plan? Because there's a lot of people still signing up for it. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and I don't know whether that's working anymore, because you can you can do a lot of business at home now, working for yourself in side hustles on the internet. So dentistry may
Yes.
be struggling to get people. But tell me about the people who come to you. Obviously, they hear your story, they identify with your story, and they go, you know, that's a future version of me if I don't change. Um,
Mhm.
how how good is that in terms of being able to help people to make a U-turn, turn their lives around? How good is that?
Man, it is extremely fulfilling. You know, I think the way that I can relate to it inside of dentistry is like when I would do a full mouth rehabilitation or a full arch of implants and transform somebody's life or make such a significant impact. There was such an emotional paycheck with that. And this has also been my experience inside of the coaching scenario, is that when you can take a dentist and you just watch, it doesn't even have to be that maybe they're struggling in their practice. They might just have something going on in their life that is just holding them at a certain place and they've hit a plateau. Or there's some people that, hey, the wheels have come completely off the bus and we're not in a good place. But watching that transition for them and the transformation is exciting. And I love that. And it gets me excited in the same way that it is when we create a great transformation in somebody's dental experience or their oral health. And I love that. And I love that opportunity. And to me, it's a fun part of being able to be a part of that process or that guide along the way in order to do that. And, for me, I look at it from a perspective of, I was just sharing this. I had a coaching call tonight with some of my guys. And one of the things I was sharing with them on there is I said, listen, I said, it's going to be a little counterintuitive that as your coach, I'm telling you this, but part of my goal is that to give you the tools and the frameworks and everything for you to not only learn them, but live them and then be able to leverage them at such a high level that you don't need me. That's my ultimate goal, is so that now you can take and trust the voice inside of you to guide you to make the educated choices and decisions that you need to make, and that you're trusting yourself with enough clarity and you've given yourself enough ability to stand in your certainty and make decisions that matter and make big decisions that matter and do it with confidence. If you can do that, now I know that I've done my job, and then you don't need me. I don't want somebody to need me. I want to train you to not need me, but I want to give you the tools to be successful.
That's that John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership. When they get to that 4th level, they're on their own, but when they get to that 5th level, they're actually leaders of other people as well.
Absolutely.
And that yeah, you're right, because it can coaching can be an onerous task if you're just stuck with people on level 1 who need to check every step off with you, instead of having one practice of your own with problems. All of a sudden you got 10 or 20 practices that have got all the same problem, and it's kind of like, oh, didn't I just tell you that? No, maybe I told somebody else that. but the interesting part about that is that the mistakes that people are making are mistakes that you and I have made, and mistakes
Yes.
that we have changed to
Yes.
improve. I, like you, I was considering leaving dentistry. I just felt that maybe dentistry wasn't for me. And like you, somebody, I found somebody who was, I was doing good numbers, double what the average dentist was. People say, "You're doing okay," and I'm going, "No, there's gaps in my book. I'm not." And then I found a dentist who was doing double what I was doing. And I said, he's no better dentist than me. He's in a lower socioeconomic area than me. I got to find out what he's
What
doing,
he's
and then I got
doing.
to do what
Yes.
he's doing in my place. And you know what it was? He had a coach.
Yes. I was going to say, you, you cannot see your own blind spots. You just
No.
can't. No matter how good you are, no matter what level you're at, there's always somebody to your right that is further along than you are in the journey that you can learn from, or that can see, as to your point, those blind spots and see what you can't see. And there's always people to our left that we're ahead of that we can support, that we can see those because we've been through it. We can stand in the trenches. We can also say, hey, here's how to approach it. I'm not going to save you, but I'm going to show you a way out. I like the
Really,
saying, I would rather be a leader and not a savior. And I want to look at leading people in a way that I'm not there to save you. It's going to be your responsibility to take your ownership and apply the principles or the processes or the systems. And now you have the opportunity to create what it is that you want.
I think that's exactly the way it should be. The issue is that with dentists, and I hate that category, putting people into boxes. My wife used to say this about our son when he's 28 now, but when he was 3, she said, he's not a naughty boy, he just does naughty things.
Things.
And I said, people say, oh, you're a typical dentist. I'm not a dentist. Dentistry is what I do.
Ooh, yes.
And but I will categorize people who have done dentistry and become dentists as thinking that they were smart enough to get to dental school. They were smart enough to get through dental school. And then they say,
Yes.
I should be smart enough to work it out on my own. And it goes back to those blind spots. While you were talking about that, I was thinking Tiger Woods doesn't know exactly where his hands are up there. He can watch it on a video, but if he's got his coach knows exactly where it
Exactly.
is. And
Exactly. And David, not only that, they have the opportunity to shortcut things for you. I mean, because you can, like you said, hey, maybe Tiger Woods is going to sit there and watch his video footage for a long time to see, oh, there's that one thing, here's that. But the coach is able to see that like this
yes,
and make the change, and then he can apply it immediately, as opposed to saying, I'm going to study hours and hours of film to figure out, oh, there it was. That's now what I finally saw. Because he might be watching his swing mechanics on the film, but he's not being able to see the ball flight like the coach can, right? He's just looking at the mechanics on the swing, but he might not be able to, he can't see the whole big picture. Whereas the coach can now see all that and say, all right, I see what's happening. Do this, or let's make a recommendation. Try this. Let's approach this way. And that's the beautiful thing with having the coach is the coach has been there. The coach understands where you're sitting. Now the coach can meet you where you're at because we're all at different places. And that's what the requirement, I think, of a great coach is to be able to come in and meet an individual where they're at and say, okay, I completely get where you are. Now, let's get clear on where we are and let's get really clear on where we want to go. Let's see what's getting in the way, and then let's start to solve it. It becomes a very easy equation.
it does. One of the difficult things in coaching, though, Jeff, as you all know, is that we are only seeing what they give us at this instant. And with the golf swing, and I remember a friend of mine who was a really good golfer, she was a friend of my dad's, he said, David, most golf problems come down to 2 things. It's grip and stance. And that's what happens at the start.
The start.
And so
Yes.
when somebody comes to me with a problem now, it's kind of like, well, let's just go back. They said, oh, I've got this problem. What should I say to this patient who's cancelled their appointment? I said, what you should say to them is what you should have told them when you presented the case to them and
Yes.
asked them these questions to get them to own what they were going to have. And you didn't do that. Now you're going to try and buy it back on the phone. You may as well go through it. You're not going to succeed in getting that happen, but at least you'll have one role play up that you should next conduct face to face next time. And so often as you all know, they come with this problem. Let's go, well, let's just go back and see what happened back here. Here's the problem. It's like the guy,
Yeah.
you've seen the video, the guy trying to scoop the water up over the iron fence and it's coming back through underneath. And the
Yeah.
water's coming from up the hill. You got to stop that. You
Yes.
can't just stop it down the bottom. So
Yes. Very
that's
true.
that. But you will only get that snapshot. And sometimes, Jeff, as you'll find, you've told them something a couple of years ago. They haven't implemented that. You've assumed they have, and then all of a sudden, oh, you're not doing that. Well, that's why this is. Oh, we didn't think that was important. We didn't think those
Yes.
wheel nuts were important in holding that wheel on.
Right.
We thought one
Yeah.
wheel nut would hold the wheel on, not five.
Well, and that's why I also am a firm believer in not just continuing to teach more and more and more just to teach. Let's get you working with the frameworks or the systems or the processes, and let's make sure they're actually working in your life. And that's an important part. You brought up something earlier that I wanted to touch on because I think it's important for the audience to hear, and it's the fact of identity, because that becomes such an important part of success no matter what we're doing. When you said, yeah, but you're a dentist and we can put ourselves into this box and everything. And I love that you said, no, well, dentistry is something that I do. And that's the way that I look at it. Like, dentistry is still something that I get to do. I love it. I enjoy it. I'm passionate about it. And as long as I look at it like I get to do it, then I want to continue to do it for the time frame that I do it. But it's not who I am. That's the beauty of it. Like, there's so much more. And when you start to think of identity becomes so important along the lines of, I start to look at things like, for example, what's a part of my identity within like a role that I have to take, or a lead that I have to have in my life, because those are the things now that start to define you, who you are. And I like to look at things that aren't going to necessarily be taken away. Because let's face it, if something happened to my hands and I couldn't practice dentistry anymore, and if my whole identity is being a dentist, guess what? That could be taken away. If my whole identity is being a great husband and somehow either I got divorced or one of us died, if my wife died, then I'm no longer married. And that can be taken away. Same thing with kids. So you have things that can be lost. And I think there's also a big part of a problem with when a dentist is at this age where he's looking to retire or sell a practice, there becomes a big identity shift in that period of time that can be really, really difficult. And they feel like they've lost a lot of purpose and zeal for life because they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into building this amazing practice, and that is their baby. But when you can start to learn things along the way and start to identify as a whole bigger aspect for yourself besides dentistry, there's so many more roles that you play in. But when you start to look at like operating as an individual who operates in integrity, that's very different. That becomes part of your identity. That's something that somebody can't take away from you. That's a decision that you make, of way of being, the way that you show up, the way that you operate. When you start to have those types of central core aspects to your identity, now it doesn't matter what's happening extraneously, and nobody can take those things away from you.
You raise a really good point. And I was talking to, I think it was Gary Bird, who said that dentists fall into two types. There's people who go into dentistry because they have a family history. My dad was a dentist, my uncle was a dentist. I was going to follow in those footsteps. And then there's others who go into it because of another reason. And he said most people go into it for that family reason. Now, you didn't. You went in because you were interested in how they put you back together.
Right.
I went into it because, as the Seinfeld episode says, I didn't get into medical school. So dentistry was my next choice. And after 2 years of dental school, my grades were so good, they gave me the transfer to medicine. But I said, everybody I went to school with didn't go to university. They were already electricians, plumbers, whatever. They were actually
Yes.
earning money. And I thought, I can't study for another 5 more years on top of this. I just got 3 years of study to go, and I'm out. And
Yes.
I learned my customer service skills by working in a bar, in a club.
Perfect.
And I learned,
Perfect.
and it's not so ruthless as it is in the US, where you make your money on tips and wages are insignificant, but I still made good money on tips. I worked out the better I was at being friendly to my customers, the more they tip me. And so that's where I learned my people skills. Most importantly, was in that power of relationship. And to bring that into dentistry, you got to become a best friend. You know it. You got to become a best friend to 16 or 20 different people every half hour. You're changing them over, and you got to be their
Yes.
best friend and make them trust you. And
Yes. And create a culture that exemplifies that also with your team, because they buy into that relationship equally as well, and that's a huge part of it too, is that you can be an amazing dentist. You can have this incredible skill set that you're able to apply, and that you're able to get incredible results for people. But if you don't create an experience for individuals that are coming into your practice, then it's easy just to become a commodity. And I hear over and over again, one of the greatest compliments that I get and that we get to hear is that I knew that you guys were not going to be the cheapest. Matter of fact, I knew that you guys were really quite the most expensive. But when a patient says that and then they follow it up and say, but the reason that I chose to come here is because you all made me feel like family. I love that. That's probably one of the greatest compliments that we can receive, because it means that we've created a relationship with that patient or that client. We've listened to them, we've heard them, we've co-created a plan together that gets them exactly what it is that they want. And we had a great experience along the way for them. And they don't feel like they were just a number. They actually, and we love it. I mean, I love feeling like I'm working on my friends. So when we're coming in, I want to truly get to know you. And as I said earlier in part of the conversation, I'm just naturally curious anyway. So it makes it kind of fun for me. I'm just get to play authentically me, which is great. And that's just part of the natural curiosity of it. And that's what I enjoy having conversation. Sometimes I'll have my team members like, okay, like I'm talking a lot because I love to talk. And that's great. But guess what? What that allows for is it allows for somebody to have a unique experience inside of our practice. And that's very different.
it's so important. My practice was located in the central business district of Sydney's second city. 30 minutes away from the central business district of Sydney. So it was very much a business related practice. People wouldn't bring their children there because it's hard to get parking and whatever. But we had patients who would still come from a long way away and park a way away and then still have to walk to get to our office. But I would go to the Chamber of Commerce events. They would have a monthly event, first Tuesday evening of the month, and each business would host it. And they said, people would say to the chamber people, they would say, I'm new here. I've set up my business in this town. Where should I go to the dentist? And they would just say, you just got to go and see David at Active Dental. They said, they're not the cheapest in town, but they're worth it.
Yes. And that's a great compliment.
You'll pay a little bit more, but it's worth it. And that's exactly what it is. And I remember when I left my practice after I'd sold it, and after the second owner took over, after 7 years, I couldn't work there anymore. And there was a lady who had been a patient of my next door neighbour's practice, which I bought 20 years before that and merged them together. So she was in her 80s. And my wife had said, David's leaving the practice, and she said, can I have a word with him? So I came out and she said, I just wanted to say thank you for looking after me. And I said, but you were a patient of Ken's for 40 years before you became my patient, for 14 years. And she goes, oh, him? All he used to say was open wide. And then an hour later he'd say, Good, that's it. See you next time. She said, you guys really took an interest in what I did and made me
Mhm.
feel like a person and a friend. And I think
Yes.
that's what you just summed up. And it's about those relationships. And if you can have those relationships with your patients and with any customer in any business, if you see
Yes.
if a customer sees value in what you do, they don't mind paying more. They don't care what other people doing that same service do because they're happy with the relationship and the service that you give them. And that's we were discussing this before, but that's about 20 to 25% of the population, and that's a really nice pond to fish in if you're dealing with people who are just looking. But it's not those people aren't looking for that in everything. Some people are very cheap and nasty about some things, but about their
Sure.
personal health, they really
They
take care.
they can absolutely, and it comes down to what the important factors are for you. I think one of the great things. I mean, we could talk about 50 different ways or 100 different ways of different ideas that you can do to make a client's day inside the practice and everything. But what I want you to understand is the fact that it doesn't even have to be something that's like a great expense or anything like that. David, to your point, it's looking at making somebody feel seen and heard and actually celebrating them as well. And one thing that we came up with just a couple of years ago, I said, let's just do like we call it the smile gauntlet. And meaning that like when we finish restoring somebody, whether it be from restorative dentistry or whether it be with implants or even orthodontics or whatever it may be, once they're done that day, then we get some pictures with them and we celebrate them inside of the operatory room. And then we've got a pretty big team. We've got like 23 people, and then whoever's available will just radio, and then they'll come and stand in the hallway. So when that person walks out, then they get to walk through and everybody celebrates them and claps for them. And every single person gets a little giddy up or a little extra little, spunk in their step. And it's just so fun to watch that. It doesn't cost anything to do, but what you just did is you made an experience for somebody that they actually got to be celebrated. And you think about how little we get to be celebrated in our life nowadays. It's very sad to think that. But the fact that if somebody takes out some time specifically to just celebrate something about you, think about how great that makes you feel.
It 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 it's life changing. Sorry, I'm losing my continuity because I'm just thinking of a story as you were talking about that. When I did my first Las Vegas Institute course, you have to do an upper anterior aesthetic case of veneers, and you need a patient. So nobody wanted to pay for 10 veneers in my practice, but one patient said to me, David, I'll do it as long as I don't have to pay. And she was maybe 4 or 5 years younger than me. And she said, I didn't even have wedding photographer because my teeth were so grey.
Mm.
And she said, I just never smiled at my wedding. So we did her, and they were also crooked. And her daughter sat in while we were prepping them. And after we did those LVI cases, I probably only did about 20 in my career. We would send them off for glam shots at a photography studio and get all that, and they would allow us to then have big posters. Well, I'm thinking must have been 2021. Jane and I went down to Tasmania, drive to Melbourne, get the ferry over with your car and into Hobart. And the first morning we're sitting there at a well-known cafe in Hobart. And I said to Jane, I said, that woman over there just came in with a group of 3 women. She looks just like our patient, Kate Giles. And we could only see the back of her head. So we're looking for pictures of her on our phones. We go, I think it is her. So I just walked up to her, and once we realised that it was, I walked up to her and I just put my arm around her and I said, sorry to interrupt. I said, but my wife and I think that you look very much like a patient that we once had at our practice. And she just cracked up and she said to her friends, this is the guy who did my teeth. And this is the guy who did my teeth. It changed my life. And it was like, wow. And we hadn't seen her for some 6 or 7 years. And so it was really weird to be, and then to be 1,000 miles away or 1,000 kilometers
Yeah.
away and across the water. It was just a fluke that we bumped into her. But those relationships that you have, and again, the story in that is too that if I'd have said, well, I can't get a patient, so I'm not doing the course, I wouldn't have learned those
It changed your
skills to be
life.
able to change lives on other people who then paid for that experience and did did that work. Um,
Yes.
it's crazy. One of my LVI cases was a redo. A lady had a redo of veneers that were done 10 or 12 years somewhere else, and sadly, she was in her 80s. She passed away 6 months after we seeded the veneers.
Finished.
But her daughter said, she was so glad that she had her teeth done. It changed her life for that last 6 months.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
you wouldn't deny your 80-year-old grandmother a new fridge and say, look, you're not going to live long. Just buy an ice box and,
Yeah.
and you're not going to get the value out of a fridge, just,
Yes.
just
Give people what they want. And, and I think too, I think individuals who, as we age and as we go through this process in life, I think it's sad because I think as we get older, sometimes we get written off or we write people off, just like you, to your point of like, well, you're not going to get a lot of time out of that, and I love the fact, like, true story, like, I love when people say, well, I'm getting 78 or I'm getting 80. And I'll say, great. That means you really have a great chance of continuing to live a lot longer. So the truth comes down to, like, what is the quality that you want to have for your life and in the rest of it? And true story, we did full arch of implants on an individual who was 100,
oh,
and
wow.
he wanted that because he wanted to go out of this world with a very healthy smile and healthy teeth and be able to eat what he wanted. And I think he lived another, I want to say almost either 2.5 or 3 years. And he's like, that he was the happiest guy. He's like, the best money I've ever spent. And it was fantastic. And so it comes down to again, back to our stories and our perception and our reality that we create for ourselves.
You're right. If we've got limiting beliefs, then we're going to narrow our path and our opportunity. And if we've got a broad base of beliefs, and you're probably the same as me, my philosophy is that if it has been done, then it can be done. Now, I'm not going to
Yes.
run it as fast as Usain Bolt, but in business, I can create. There's plenty of people out there. I can create the team that will help me to put what
Yes.
I have seen others do into action and get some reward. It's the movie Sabrina. Isn't that the whole principle that the rich guy's drive? Sabrina's dad was the driver for this really wealthy guy, and he
Yes.
just took
Yes.
everything that he was saying and bought smaller quantities of those stocks.
Yes. Yes.
And
Absolutely. And it is. It's around the people that you surround yourself with. And back to your point with coaching is looking at surrounding yourself with people that are willing to hold up the mirror for you to see and also act as a consultant to tell you here's the next best steps to do, and then let you then start to move forward with your own actions. Because you're right, we can either take the long way and figure out how to DIY it yourself and do that and take 5 to 10 years, or we can go ahead and take the shortcut. And the older I get in my life, I'd rather pay for that speed and that efficiency all the time because I want to spend more time with my family and my excursions that we take or adventures that we create, and just to be able to have that time. That's what's meaningful to me.
it's funny, and you probably know dentists who do this who say, I'm happy cutting my own lawns because it's therapeutic. And I used to be the same. My home in Sydney had it had a nature strip from the fence to the road, and then from the fence to the house was steep, so it was garden, stairs, driveway. There was no lawn to mow, and then we had a back lawn, and we were going for a vacation overseas, and the guy who was mowing my next door neighbour's lawn, I said to him, I said, how much would it cost for you to mow my lawn while I'm overseas for 6 weeks? And he said, probably $50 each time. And I said, my next words to him was, how much would it cost for you to mow it while I'm here?
Well, yes,
Because
I
it
was
was
going to
such
say
good value.
yes. You're
And
like, well, wait a
and that
second.
that relationship, let me just tell you, that relationship with him, he used to take photos. We were talking about Instagram. He'd take photos of my lawn after he'd mowed it and put it on Instagram. It looked like Lord's cricket ground. You know,
It was
it was
beautiful.
I'd set it up, but he just kept maintaining it. And so, same thing. I don't care what he charged, $50. There was value. I didn't care what the guy over the road was paying his guy. My guy he said, your lawn's the best in the Shire. And I go,
Yes.
love it. But it's again about being sensible about why I'm not. I got the pleasure at the end of lawn mowing, but the chore of it was too much, and it was robbing me of opportunity of spending time with the family, and also even a couple of hours working on my business. And this guy
Yes.
could do it during the week, and I used to love pulling in, on a weekday and seeing, he's Markham's been and mown the lawn, and so again, that customer service thing. And he, again, through social media, we've kept in touch for a long time. Just even though I'm not up there. In fact, the guy who lives next door is still a good friend of ours as well. But it's a funny old world, isn't it? But it's about relationships, and it's about service, and about
Mhm.
you mentioned it. People want to be respected and heard. And the
Mhm.
opposite of that is why people leave dental practices, not because the work's bad, but they feel taken for granted and ignored. And if we
Yes.
can avoid that, giving them that emotion and give them that respect and that friendship, then we'll have a great business.
Nothing in this world works without relationship. Nothing. It
No.
doesn't. And relationships what's required, and that's why when we can get into relationship with somebody, that's very, very different than rapport. And relationship, then we can have deeper conversations. We can have agreed upon courses of action. And you know about me and I know about you personally, professionally, whatever. And from that standpoint, that creates a comfort, it creates a trust, it creates a value that now, why do they want to go somewhere else where they don't feel that way, or they don't feel heard, or they don't feel respected, or at the end, they don't get celebrated? So when you create those types of environments, it's all that little subtle things that allow you to actually start to win. And because people want to feel great. And, the old saying is people will buy to either move away from pain or move closer to pleasure. And if you really group that down into one thing, people just want to feel better. And if we look at giving us and our patients or our clients and our team members an opportunity to do that from the way in which we show up and the way in which we lead and the way our being is now we have an opportunity to create impact. And that creates the ability. That's why we get a lot of people who send referrals. We do a lot of marketing and we do a lot of advertising, but we also get a ton of referrals just because of the relationships that you talked about are created. And just to your point, they'll say, yeah, go see them there at Granbury Dental Center. They'll take great care of you, and that's where you want to be. And it's just wonderful to have that and to hear that. And, inside of those systems and processes and people, those people are the part of the culture then that creates that unique experience as well. And I think that's so important.
You can't do it. I was telling my physiotherapist this today as I was leaving. I said, and it's the same in dentistry. You've got to surround yourself with a good team. I said, you're spending time here now writing out my exercise regime. You need to have that where you just go, I'll send it to you. And you've already written it out, and it's just click, 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 click. Because while you're writing that out, if you've got a receptionist, she's not in there massaging the next person. And so the economics of your business grinds to a halt. And I think in dentistry, one of the best things that I ever did was work out of alternate rooms, because once I left the room, the dental assistant then took over, and it wasn't a rush to get the patient out to get the next person in, because when you work out of one room, it's kind of like when you finish a ride at an amusement park. You chucked off the ride and you don't know, did I get everything? Did some of my stuff fall out? And it's kind of like, what was that? And I remember my sister once describing, she was interviewed on morning TV when she was a travel writer. And I said, I saw you on TV. And she goes, it's really weird, David. She said, 7:15 in the morning, I'm out in the streets of Sydney and full of TV makeup. And I go, what the heck just happened? And we do that to our patients. It's kind of like, I'm $2,000 lighter. I got a numb face. I can't see it. What just happened to me? So we just got to create that give them the ability to hang around after, and create the value. And sometimes I remember one patient, she came, she got her daughter's teeth done, and then she got her teeth done, and hers had been neglected because of family issues and not being able to afford it. But after we finished her, she would come and buy the periodontal mouthwash from us. She'd be there for an hour buying something that the Curacept that she couldn't get at the pharmacy. But she'd be bringing things that she'd made and cakes and stuff and photos, and let her keep doing it. It was about relationships.
Why, I mean, we love when our patients bring stuff and we call them, we thank them. And then at the same time, we will, let's face it, like if there's a death and there's somebody passes away or that, I mean, we take the time for us all to write like a personal card and just things of that nature. And it just shows that, from that point of just having a true relationship with that individual, it just allows us to authentically show up and be a real person on top of just being a professional, and, when I sit here and think about it, one of the things that I think is important too, David, is that, look, there's a gazillion different ways that you could practice dentistry. And I think one of the biggest things is just to find truly what it is that you like to do and the lanes that you like to be in, and then just really start to hyper focus on that. But the truth is, or what I find to be useful is looking at it from a perspective of, you have the opportunity to write your own story any way that you want to create it. So create the practice that you desire. And it doesn't have to be the way anybody else wants it to look for you, but get really clear on what it is that you want, or your goals or your targets. Get clear on them monetarily, what you want that to look like. Get clear on what your practice wants to look like. Get clear on the types of procedures that you want to be able to do and offer. Get clear on what it is that you want your team, how you want them to look and present themselves, and what you want to be able to offer with your team and the culture that you want to create. When you can get super clear about all of that, now you can actually start to create a vision that then becomes something that you can create a reality around for the practice that you truly desire to create. At the same time, what I had to learn the hard way, you can build that without burning down the rest of your life. You can keep that practice going here, and at the same time, elevate what's going on inside of your family, with your wife and with your kids, or with your husband, if you're a female dentist, and your spouse, kids. You can elevate your health. You can elevate your purpose. If you believe in God, you can elevate that too, whatever your faith is. All of these things can rise simultaneously. And that's one of the biggest lies that I think that I was sold is that in order for my practice to be successful, I had to let these other things kind of fall by the wayside. And the truth, my truth is, or my reality is now I learned that No, it doesn't have to be that way. All these things can actually arise together simultaneously. Matter of fact, when we create synergy and harmony across these areas, we call it body, being, balance, and business. So our body, our health, our fitness, our being, our spirituality, our purpose, our balance, our relationships, and our business, our practice, when we create all four of those in synergy and harmony with one another, now we can have a life that truly matters and have it all, but we have the greatest opportunity to set ourselves free. And that's truly what I think most of us are after, is to have this freedom in our life, just as you pointed out, to be able to go create, to be able to go travel, to be able to have experiences. At the end of the day, at the end of our life, we can look back at the stuff, and the stuff doesn't matter. Like the houses, the cars, that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is, what was the experiences and the adventures that I got to have and the memories that I got to create along the way? When I can look back and know that, man, that was awesome. I left it all on the table, or I left it all on the field, then life is pretty fulfilling. I don't want to get to the end and go, man, I could have done this.
I could have spent more time at the office.
Well, yeah, nobody says that.
It's not written on any tombstone.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
Jeff, we've come to the end of our time. We've talked way too long before, during, and it's been great. And it's 11:30 at night there now. It's
yes,
it's getting on, but I've really enjoyed it. So, Jeff, on behalf of the viewers and listeners to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, thank you very much for being a guest. Can you just briefly tell me, how's the best way for people to get in contact with you? What's the best method?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jeffrey Buske on there. And one of the easiest ways too, you can find me on Instagram, Dr. DRJ and Dr. period JEFFBUSKE, Dr. Jeff Buske on Instagram. And just message me. And that's one of the easiest ways that you can get in touch with me. And if you've got some things that you're going through, or would like me to look at something for you to see if I could help you or support you in any way, be more than happy to visit. Dentistry, I think, can be it can be a very lonely place if we let it. And at the same time, it can be very supportive if we invite that in. So, I love our profession, and I am, I've chosen to take a stand in dentistry to be a creator of transformation, meaning that, it's part of my goal on the bigger picture to have an opportunity to reduce divorce, to reduce depression, to reduce sedation, to reduce suicide inside of our profession. And I really feel like we can create a movement together that allows us to create a focus that allows us to really leave our profession better than what we found it.
I think those are, you've raised a really good point, and again, we could talk again for hours on this. It does get very lonely in a dental office, and because of this perception that we've been successful, a lot of dentists don't reach out for assistance, and they just turn to substance or suicide, and that's not an answer for that's not an answer for anyone. Jeff, thanks so much. I know you're going to sleep well after the trials and tribulations of my computer down here, but it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to speaking with you again. So,
yes, David, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. It was great. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.